transition that happens between life and death, and the ease of that is, we can have palliative care and EOL. A lot of people are against end-of-life drugs, which is not the thing that it's like prolonging life, but you're not prolonging life there at all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written death on that second that will come. It doesn't matter how many drugs you have, how much palliative care you have, when death is written for you, that will, it will come. So that's the second thing. And the last thing is DNA CPR. So you might have seen films or things when the ambulance people go and they put the magnetic things on the chest and they try to bring people back to life again. Now, when a person has breathing issues, or for example asthma or certain types of lungs illnesses, what happens is that they try to put them back to life again, shall I say, with the magnetic electric pulse. Now, sometimes what happens is that it's so powerful, it can push the ribs, so it becomes worse for the person. So you have to sign a document, a legal document, or the doctors will ask, should we sign you in for DNA CPR, where the ambulance or the paramedic services try to relive, do that or not. And this is given, that choice is given when a person is on end-of-life care. Okay? So these are three things that we need to consider and we need to think about just before a person, when our loved ones are on their end-of-life care. A muhtadar is a person who is just about to die. It's from hadara, which means the death is present. So the positioning of the muhtadar. Now this is, remember this, when we come to janazah, the safety of two individuals is always to consider. Number one is the safety of yourself. So do not try to, for example, pick things up which will hurt you. You have to keep yourself safe. Okay? And number two, the ease of the deceased. So if the deceased, now in the kitabs we'll see that you should face the qibla and so forth. If that is going to cause harm to the deceased, leave the deceased how it is. If the mouth is open, in the kitabs we read that the mouth should be closed with a cloth. If that is going to cause harm to the deceased, leave it. Okay? It is not farziyat, it's not compulsory to do that. Yes, it is sunnah and it is advisable, it is advised to do that, it is good to do that. But it is not something necessary. If it causes harm to the deceased or yourself, leave it, just leave it. So, lie the person on the right side facing the qibla, trying to put in pillows underneath them so they're facing the qibla. This is just before the death happens. Moistening the face and lips is not, with water, it does not necessarily have to be zamzam. A lot of people think it has to be zamzam, it can be any type of water, just the transition to become ease for them. Want to pray, we pray kalima tayyiba, we don't inform, or we don't advise, or we don't say you read them to the muhtadar, to the person dying. Everybody in the gathering within the room should recite, so then they copy. Pray Surah Yasin, some scholars advise to recite Surah Al-Ra'd. There's so many things written in the books, but the easiest thing to remember is pray Surah Yasin and the kalima tayyiba. Kalima shahada, kalima tayyiba, just carry on repeating that. There's many du'as, many advices given in kitabs, but these are two things that we should try and do, kalima tayyiba and Surah Yasin. Now, so after the person has transited from muhtadar, the signs of death, now the last stages of life, which is called sakarat, just about before the angel of death comes and takes the soul away and the end of life. So these are some of the signs that you'll see. So breathing becomes rapid, pulse becomes irregular, nose becomes bent, forehead subsides, body becomes cold, feet starts to limp, weakness of the body. So these are signs of sakarat, where the person, the angel, because death starts from the toes. It starts from the bottom of the toes, or from the bottom of the feet, all the way to, and goes towards the head, and then comes out of the mouth. That's how, so people's feet started to freeze first. Yeah, the blood stops pushing from there. So that's called sakarat, the end of life, just before the stage of death. So in this section, what we learned is a muhtadar, a person about to die. What we should do, which is called talqeen, that praying kalima tayyiba and Surah Yasin. And when a person is about to die, what are the signs? Sakarat. Any questions? Anybody?
Malani, when you mentioned about the DNA CPR,
yeah.
What's the ruling with that? Is it similar to the palliative care? As in, should you not sign for it, or is it not simple depending on? It's not
that simple. If a person is 90 years old, 90 years old, their bones are very weak. doing CPR, you'll give it, the cause of death will be because of that more than anything else, because the bones are very weak. If a person is younger and stronger, CPR is good, it's fine to do that. So depending on each individual person. But it's the same thing, yes, how end-of-life drugs are, where it's not something that prolongs life, it's a suburb only. It's allowed to do, you're allowed to do that, but you have, each individual case is different.
If you're doing this COVID business with people being in hospital for months and months and family can't visit them, obviously there are hair growth and stuff like that. What are you supposed to do with that? Are you supposed to cook?
We'll come to that. Please just try to ask questions related to the section that we're talking about. So then we will come to that, inshallah.
You know, it's about palliative care. You know, like my father, he was in induced coma when he was in hospital. And one alim said that, you know, took him out of the coma and took off, you know, the drugs they were on. And that's, you know, what his opinion was. We, the family, we didn't do that. What we did, we just, you know, wanted to be, you know, comfortable as possible. And we kept the drugs on. But I don't know why they have that opinion that, you know, take off the... You
know what it is? What I've learned within the last 4 or 5 years, alhamdulillah, within our groups we have doctors, surgeons, we have medical experts as well. Try to ask those individuals who are experts in that field. Do not just take opinions of individuals. I'm not a doctor, but I've always, the things that we will tell you have been checked by biologists, also by doctors, by GPs, by different types of medical experts. So saying that, you know, if a Muslim doctor or a doctor has advised to keep on the palliative care, you should listen to that. Now, the opinion of different alims, I can't argue with that. Why they have that opinion, that's their own opinion. I can't really say anything about that. So, okay?
What is Islam say about the drugs and all that?
I mean, that's what I'm saying. So if the doctors have advised to say that keep the drugs on, that may ease the transition, then we should listen to that. We should listen to that. But if the doctors have advised not to, then we should listen to that too. Okay? So moving on. So these are after the person has passed away, these are necessary preparations that we have to do for the janazah, for the funeral. Okay? So now, what paperwork is necessary, required for burial, death at home, hospital, expected, unexpected, practical tasks, post-mortem, and bereavement. So this is the most important part that we'll go through now. So after the moments of death immediately, the du'as, the sunnah, this is inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, stop the recitation of Quran. So after a person dies, within that room, we should not recite Quran. Recite Quran in another room, not in the same room. Okay? Gently close the eyes, gently close the jaws, and tie with a strip of cloth around the head. Then straighten the limbs. Again, if that is going to cause harm, if a person is paralyzed, straightening the limbs is going to cause harm to them. If it's going to cause harm to the individual or the person doing it or the deceased, do not do that. Okay? So these are things that we advise to do. And if we do it straight away, it is easy to do. Closing the eyes or closing the jaws straight away, it is much easier to do because the body is still warm. If you do it after a few hours, essentially, the body freezes up. It's virtually impossible to close the jaws. Place the legs and toes together and tie the ankles with a strip of cloth. Remove all jewelry. Okay, this is, on this point, we're going to mention about COVID. Now, especially for the sisters, if a person has been admitted to hospital, try to advise them to take, especially if they're quite senior and ill, take all jewelry off. We've had cases where we have to get grinders in and cutters in to take bangles off and rings off. And it's a difficult thing. But try to, when you send them to hospital, if they're admitted to hospital, take all the jewelry off. But if a person has died, taking the jewelry off straight away is quite easy. Compared to if they're in hospital for a couple of days in a mortuary, it's virtually impossible to take jewelry off because the body expands and freezes up in certain ways. The hand freezes up in certain ways, so you can't take jewelry off. Then you have to get grinders and wire snippers and all that to take bangles off. So on a note that if it's, especially during this time, if a person, especially the women folk, if they're admitted to hospital, tell them to remove the jewelry before they go to hospital. Do not remove nails or unwanted hair. So your question here, brother, that however a person dies, that's how we should bathe them and send them off. So even if a person has pubic hair, if a person has the nails grown, you cannot cut them. Yes, before their death, you're not to do that. So however a person dies. Now, this is one culture that we've come out of now, but a lot of people, a lot of sects still do this, that they think that how the ghusl of a deceased is the same as the ghusl of a living person. So how we clean ourselves, how we shave, and how we trim our tash, or we do our hair, and we take our pubic hair off, they also do that. There is a culture, and there is within our sects, the people do that. But Islamically, Sharia says that however a person dies, that's how he should be washed and buried. Cover the body with a clean cloth. Now, what happens is that sometimes at the time of death, when sakarat happens, some people urinate, some people they bleed, some people pus comes out. Certain different individuals have different ways, so that becomes napak. So try to cover the body with a cloth, even if it's a bed sheet or a towel, just cover the body with that. And also is that at the time of sakarat, especially with the women folks, sometimes because the pain is so difficult, they rip their clothes, or sometimes their aura is shown. So that's why we should cover the body like that. The du'as to recite, again, like I said, there's many du'as within the kitabs. We won't go through that. So now this is important. In Burnley, or when we Muslim burial trust, we have. If a person dies within our communities, we say that the first person you contact the imam, and then the imam will contact our family liaison, which is Maulana Shakil Sahib, and our family liaison, he will sort out everything else. That's it. So that we have 3 steps that we take. The family liaison, and he contacts the family member, and that's it, finished. But for us, in our communities where we don't have a funeral service, and a funeral service does the funeral rites, then the first thing to do is call your family doctor. If we've had situations where the kids sadly don't know who their parents' GPs are, so you should know who your parents' GPs are, because it delays a lot of things. So a family doctor, try to have a Muslim family doctor, because then it's much easier. But it's not always the case. Sometimes Muslims are also a bit making it more difficult also. But the family doctor, you should know who your GP is. The first person you should contact is the family doctor. If it's out of hours, then you contact the paramedics. If it's out of 111, you ring and you contact the paramedics. What will happen is that 111 service will send an on-call doctor to the house, or where the person is died. So the first thing is that. Number 2 is that you call a funeral director, or a funeral service that will look after the funeral rites. The third thing is the masjid imam and the management to arrange for janazah namaz, to arrange for the ghusl and so forth. And the last thing is you just close relatives. In these 4 steps, we have not put to announce for janazah namaz anywhere. Neither do you announce what time the ghusl will be. Neither do you tell the whole world. You do not put on social media anything at all. Because you will learn that when a person dies one day, it can be even 5 days later the burial will happen. It can be 5 days later that the ghusl will happen because of certain situations. So that's why it's very important to keep it very closed in the initial stages. Especially another reason why is because when it goes out on social media, and it's overwhelming for the immediate family anyway, and then people call and people come onto the houses and people start messaging, it becomes more of a burden than relief for the deceased family. So that's why, from my experience, these are something we should do. The family doctor, or 111 call if it's out of hours. Number 2, a funeral director. Number 3, the masjid imam and the committee and the management. And the 4th thing is the close relatives. But when we've done these workshops before, what we try to do with advised masjid is to have like a funeral group and have one contact within the masjid, where a person then he liaises with everybody else, the funeral director and the masjid and everything. So it takes the burden off the family. Now there's 4 scenarios in this country a person can die. Scenario 1, person dies at home. And the death is expected, for example, cancer. The doctors have said, you've got 6 months to live. Cancer is an example I can give. Cause of death is known by the doctors. No post-mortem needed. Now, we had this situation about 2 weeks ago. A person died at home. A gentleman died at home, and the district nurse came. And he was out of hours. The district nurse came. She said, okay, we know he's going to die. This is it. So after this, if this is the situation, then you are allowed to move the body, take a ghusl, and wait. You're allowed to do the ghusl, kafan, not the dafan. You're not allowed to bury, just the ghusl. You're allowed to move the body to the masjid, give the ghusl, wait. Because that has to be confirmed by the doctor first. So once the doctor confirms it, then the second and third stage comes in. In the first situation, if a district nurse comes to the home, those who have palliative care, the district nurse will comes once a day.
Would the district nurse leave any note or anything, or is it just a
Okay, so if it's an expected death, it's like, you can say it's like a mock certificate she's given, or they'll give, the district nurse will give. And that will be, they will automatically send that to the GP, and the GP will then liaise with the family. Or the next day the GP, or the family will have to liaise with the GP. The second scenario is a person dies at home and the cause of death is unknown. The post-mortem most likely will be required, because in that situation, the police will be involved firstly, because it will be a murder case. Until proven that it's not a murder, it will be considered as a murder. If a person dies at home and the death is unexpected, then it will be considered as a murder default. So when the police comes in, then the paramedics will come, and then they will decide on that situation. They look at the medical history. If the police are happy, then they will automatically contact the funeral services to move the body. But most of the time, it's a post-mortem. Scenario 3, person dies in hospital or a hospice. The cause of death is known, no post-mortem needed. This is similar to scenario 1. Scenario 4, person dies in hospital, cause of death is unknown, post-mortem may be required. So in the second scenario, person dies at home, unexpected death. Say for example, he had a heart attack. He has no history of anything with cardiology or any breathing issues, and that's a cause of death that they will have to investigate. The coroner is the person that signs. He's the main person, shall we say, in the funeral line. That it's up to him who he signs off. Certain cases will be referred to the coroner. So where a post-mortem is needed, most of the time is referred to the coroner's office, and the coroner's office decides, should we pursue this, should we release this body or not. Now, in the last probably about 10 years now, less than 10 years probably, we moved away from full post-mortem to MRI or MRA scans, digital post-mortem they call it, or digital autopsy. We held a funeral awareness workshop quite a few years ago, and we had our local coroner as well as the pathologist, a doctor that opens people up to see what's the cause of death. Mashallah, our pathologist is a Muslim, he's an Egyptian doctor. So he explained to us that 97% of deaths now are digital autopsy. Only 3% are referred to as full autopsy, where they cut the person up. So when a person, a lot of elders come to us and say that, can we sign a document that I don't want a post-mortem? You can't do that. Legally, you can't do that. And there's certain reasons why they do post-mortems. One is to learn about new sciences and new medicines and new cause of death, or why that happened. 2 is to protect the people, or the doctors, or the palliative care, or the staff, or whoever's looking after the medical staff, if they have done something wrong. And 3 is to put the ease of mind to the family. Now, as Muslims, yes, we want to, we'd like to do the burial as soon as possible. But in certain situations, certain scenarios, we need to understand that the law of the land has to be abided, the fact that a post-mortem has to take place. But like I said, so most of the time they will do a MRA scan or a digital autopsy, and then if that does not come out correct, if the coroner is not happy with that, they will do a full post-mortem. That's where the delay might happen of burials and ghusls. Now, an inquest, of the coroner's inquest, or the investigation, you can say, can take up to years and months. So what will happen is that a person dies, he's referred to the coroner's office, they do a digital autopsy, the coroner isn't happy, they do a full autopsy, the coroner is happy with that, and then the coroner releases the body after 5 days, then he can do a burial. Then the family will be contacted, then the coroner will investigate, they'll have a law team, they'll have lawyers, solicitors. They might investigate for years, 3, 4 years, 4, 5 years. We've had cases where 3, 4 months sometimes they happen. Then they go to a jury, they go to the courts, and they settle that. The family is contacted. Sometimes it happens years and years. So the inquest or the inquiry will be directly from the family and the coroner's office. So after a person dies, so a person dies in any of the 4 scenarios, the first thing that will happen, either the doctor, so the district nurse, the doctor, paramedic staff, or the coroner's office. So these 4 individuals, medical individuals, will issue something called a death certificate, or the cause of death, or they call it MCCD, a certificate of how this person has died. Until that happens, you cannot do anything. So this is the most important of paperwork that you need, and this takes the longest. After the rest of it is a domino effect. So the first one is the death certificate from your GP or from the coroner's office. The coroner's office will give a burial order. It's a similar thing. Then, getting the death certificate is the difficult one from the hospital or the doctor. After that happens, is that then you register the death. You know how we register a birth? A similar thing, you go to the town hall or the registration office, you register the death. Now the registration of death is free, but the certificate costs, in Burnley, costs £12 a copy. Now if a person, this is very important to understand, if a person has several bank accounts, or he has a pension scheme, or he has houses, or different, you have to know as a family how many certificates you will need. They do not accept photocopies, neither do they accept digital copies. It is advisory to buy as many copies as you need at that moment in time, because it will delay afterwards. Okay, so when you go to register death, so imagine he has 3 bank accounts, you get 3 copies. It costs you £36. But if you delay it, if you say, I'll do it later, they might take up to 3 months. If he has a mortgage in the house, that will carry on. There's certain things that you have, these are important things that when we're living in this country, we're living in situations that we have to understand. So imagine he has money in an account where bonds or something are, and his kids are not getting the money there, because to close the account he needs an original certificate. So I don't know how much it costs in Oldham, but in Burnley it's about £12 a copy. But you have, most of these officers will ask for an original copy. They do not take photocopies or digital copies at all. But the registration is free. The copy of a certificate is about £12. So registration, so only the following persons are allowed to register the death. So a relative of the deceased, someone present at the death, occupier of the house, another person making the arrangements. Most of the time now the funeral services will arrange that, will do the registration. So that's the second stage. So the first stage is after a person has died, we get the death certificate from the doctors. The second stage is registering the death. And once you register the death, the registration office will give 2 certificates. One we call the green. The green. So what we call the green, and the green is the order of the permission to bury the body, and another one is the certification of death, to say that we register the death. That one you keep, and the green will given to the cemetery. So once the cemetery has received the green, that's only when they can bury the body. If they do not receive a green in time, they won't bury the body. So in Burnley, Pendle, most of the cemeteries, they say that if you don't give us the green before 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, we can't have the same day burial. So they won't dig a grave. Like in Burnley, they don't dig a grave until they give us until 1 o'clock. So if we get the green to them by 12:45, they'll dig a grave for 3 o'clock for us. If we get it to 1:15, they'll say tomorrow, the next day. So it all works in synchronized. So first one is the MCCD, or the cause of death certificate from the doctors, and then the registering the death. And now obviously because of the pandemic, it's all over the phone and online, they will send it to you. That's quite easy to get, within half an hour you get that. But then you have to pass that on to the cemetery in time. Now this is the legal process in a nutshell. Has the cause of death been determined and medical certificates issued? If yes, contact the registrar, obtain death certificate and certificate of disposal, which is the green, and contact cemetery office to arrange grave and submit a green certificate. That's quite simple if it's that way. If not, death will be reported to the coroner's office. No action can be taken. So if the coroner's office takes the body, remember I said to you before, if a person dies at home and the district nurse signs it off, you're allowed to move the body and do the ghusl. If it is referred, if it's an unexpected death at the police, you can't touch the body. It's a crime scene. It's a crime scene. So the police will actually, they clear the whole room out most of the time. It's a crime scene. That body is taken by the chosen mortuary staff by the police. The police will contact them, their own staff, and take the body to the coroner's office. So no action. You can't book a janaza, you can't book the masjid, nothing at all until the coroner's office has released the body. Coroner will inform the registrar office when the certificate can be obtained. So what will happen if it goes to the coroner's office? You don't need to register the death, because it's automatically the coroner's office sends it to the registrar office, and the registration office sends it to either the cemetery or the individual person doing the funeral. So that's called a disposal certificate. There's no green there. Again, that has to be taken to the cemetery for the burial. So the burial arrangements, we mentioned this as well. Bereavement services. So this is for us for Burnley, Fendel, and the bereavement services within Oldham. I must say that it must be the Oldham Council and those places from Bury. So Bury Council, each town and city has their own bereavement services. Any questions on that section? Anybody?
Is there a cost to the digital autopsy?
No. So if you go through the digital autopsy, they do it for free. But if you go privately, so for example, we sometimes, within the last 3 years, I think we've done about 3 or 4 in Manchester, the closest one we have. I think there's one in Preston now for us as well. For you guys, in Manchester, it's about £600-700 if it's a private one. So sometimes what happens is that the coroner's office will say it's a Friday, somebody has died, and they say, okay, the earliest one available is Tuesday. If you say that no, we'll do a private one, we'll do it on that night. So they are, I think about like 24 hours, I think even. We've done it at the middle of the night sometimes. But you can do it on the weekends privately. They will accept that also.
You know,
Someone's blocked the car park. I think it's an Insignia. Yeah, Insignia MV62 VBL. MV62 VBL. Yeah, sorry.
you know when you said about someone's at home and the end of life, then if the GP is visiting at home, is it like once every 2 weeks they have to visit to keep, and they will have to sign up on the death certificate?
No, it's 28 days.
28 days.
If the GP has seen, even if even if it's over a phone call. When my father died last year, he hadn't seen the GP for about 2 months, but because he's our family GP, so he spoke to the paramedic and said, I've spoken to the patient in the last 28 days. So it's 28 days now. So within the last 28 days, if you have spoken to the medical expert who's looking after you, they accept that. It's 28 days now.
Scale 1, does that not mean the time?
Yeah. So there are certain companies that will basically you tell them, and they will operate it. But sometimes what happens is that sometimes they ask for proof, especially I know for pensions and benefits and stuff like that. They ask for proof of death. So sometimes mortgages as well. So it all depends. You need to determine yourself how many. But I know there's certain groups which will say if you tell them, they will tell all your associated banks and pensions and all that this person has died.
Is there a way of avoiding the physical autopsy? So can you refuse or say?
No, I mentioned that. No, legally you cannot do that. Legally, there's no way you can do that. But I mentioned also that 97% of autopsies now, actually probably more than 97% now, are digital autopsies. They're not full post-mortems. So we'll move on. So now near the deceased, women on Hayd, on Nifas, sitting near the deceased, reciting Quran next to the deceased, kissing the deceased, keeping the body in the mortuary, non-mahram looking at the deceased. In this section we go. So people are allowed to be present. So only allow very close family members to be present in the room and people who know what to do whilst the muhtadar is passing away. A lot of times, our Muftis used to say live luggage. People are there, they think they know what to do, but they're actually live luggage where it's like they're a burden. Try to keep individuals or people who are around who know what to do, and always have one person in charge when it comes to these things. One person should take charge and advise everybody else what to do. Any person in the state of janaba, ritual impurity, should not be present in that room. So after a person has died, it should not be present. Scholars differed whether females with her haze or nifas are allowed. So I'd advise yes and no. Now, yes and no, the reason why. With current situations where, with COVID especially, where people cannot see their family members for a very long time, I'd say yes. But in situations where, like after COVID or before COVID, I'd say no. But it's all, try to speak to your own imams and scholars and understand that. But every situation you should assess it and see that. If it's going to be somebody's very close family member and it's going to cause a fight, yes, there's a difference of opinion, it's allowed, and it's fine. Then you shouldn't different to that. Withdraw from that room. But that's why we should quicken as possible the ghusl of the person. Reciting Quran, it is makruh in the same room. So in the neighboring room, it's fine. Touching the deceased, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he passed away, Hazrat Abu Bakr came and kissed the forehead of the Prophet ﷺ. It's allowed. You're allowed to do that. Some people will differ, but we know that clearly when the Prophet ﷺ died, Abu Bakr came and kissed the forehead. In other narrations, we also hear about other Sahabas coming and touching the deceased and so forth. Seeing the deceased face, it is only permissible for mahram, not your next door neighbor, uncle, stuff like that. This is very important, we have to understand this. That yeah, I've always seen him all my life, we get this situation, but it is only permissible for mahram to see the face of the deceased, male or female. Just like once the person was living, veil, parda was observed, it should be respected in the same manner. This is very important, this is a culture for us, problem for us as well. Now, so when a person dies at home, or in the hospital, it can be the fact that the body is taken to the mortuary or the morgue. The morgue is a room or a building in which the dead bodies are kept for storage or for examination. Now ours is in Blackburn for our areas, Blackburn morgue. I'm assuming for all the.
I've got a question for the slide before.
Okay.
You know, when somebody's husband or wife dies, they're no longer the can you still see them, or does it fall out?
This is what I'm trying to say before again about you have to. Sharia says we shouldn't do that, but the thing is, with COVID nowadays, where it can break families totally apart. I'll give you an example. A couple of days ago, 2 weeks ago, somebody called me up, so this man died, and the wife asked, "Can I go and see my body because I'm in iddat?" I said yes. Now don't take this as a concrete answer. Say that you're allowed to. Women are allowed to come out of iddat. I said yes. The reason why is she hasn't seen her husband for 3 months or 2 months. So where situations like this, we have to understand that where there's a bit of flexibility, we should take that, and the better of the bad. That's it. It's best to when that time comes, ask your local imam or the ulama around you. They'll advise you better. So that if there is a risk that the funeral could be delayed, if there is a risk the funeral could be delayed of any reason, then it is recommended the body to be moved in a mortuary. Now, we have a cold table. And that cold table we can keep a body for up to 3 days. If sometimes, and alhamdulillah, it's a portable one, so we can take it to a house even, we can take it to the mosque, wherever you want to take it. But you can maximum, they say, advise 3 days. And we've never tried it. Maximum we've done is probably about 40, less than 2 days we've done. But if the funeral is going to be delayed for whatever reason, like a couple of days ago we had a janazah in Bury, and it was delayed for about 2-3 days. Now the body was in the mortuary. It's safer to keep in the mortuary for that reason. For that reason, it's safer to keep in the mortuary because it's going to be delayed for longer. Whatever reason it's going to be delayed for, it's sometimes better to keep it in the mortuary than on a cold table or in the masjid. Some masjids now have fridge systems or cold rooms to store the body as well. Any questions on that? Anybody? Okay. So now, so person has died, the certificate's been done.
Is it better to do the ghusl and leave them in a cold storage or a cold for or is it better to wait and then do the ghusl so it's fresh before?
No. The ghusl should be the first thing done as soon as possible, because 2 reasons. One is, remember this: when a person dies, he becomes in the state of, he can say janaba. He becomes in the state of ritual impurity. To take them out of ritual impurity straight away, the sooner the better. Secondly, also, you are not allowed to recite Quran or any Quran around the person in the same room. So when a person becomes pure, if you wash the body, you're allowed to read them. So these are two reasons, benefits from both sides. So you should hasten the ghusl as soon as possible.
In addition to that, what if then the janaza is delayed for whatever reason? On what conditions can you redo the ghusl if they bleed or what? On what condition?
No, so a person has, if a person bleeds after that, it's fine. The ghusl, remember, it's like janaba again. If a person bleeds, then you just do wudu. But for a deceased person, there's no wudu, so you just bury them how they are. But hasten the ghusl as soon as possible. Yes, some people, you're right. Some people, what they say that no, we should do a fresh ghusl just before the thing. But in that interim, that person in the state of janaba, they're not clean. Okay. Anybody else?
The warmer the body, the better.
Sorry?
The warmer the body, the better for the family to give the ghusl.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. So the sooner the better. That we say the limbs are not stiffened up, so it's easier to move the body around as well as the.
You said, doing straight away the ghusl and the delay, like when we said about the blood, it tells about other things that come out. And
So I mean, there's certain things that I'll show you that we use nowadays, coverings and all that you can put in. If a person, I'll give you an example. For example, we put stuff like this, bed mats underneath the coffin or the coffin, or is this stuff like that. You can put the certain things, or certain types of plasters or paddings that you can put in, depending on the body. Then you can stop the bleeding for quite a while. Okay? And especially if you put it on the cold table after that, it freezes up anyway. Yeah. Washing and shrouding. Now, I'm going to. This is a long section. I'll show you practically more than going theoretically. Okay. But what I will show you, it's farz kifaya. It's a communal obligation upon to wash the body. That's why it's very important. We've got a close relation with Blackburn Hospital, so our chaplain, we know him quite well. But certain areas where you don't have a relationship with the chaplain, and there is a person who has converted to Islam on the deathbed, who do they contact? That's why you should, the masjid, or if you have a mosque committee or whatever, all the mosques, then you should liaise with the chaplain and in the hospital to say that if a person dies as a Muslim, please do it, and nobody takes the body, please do contact us. Because certain time, what they will do, they'll cremate the body or they just dispose of the body however they want. That's what they will do. So it's very important to have that relationship. So it's farz kifaya, communal obligation. Yeah. The things that we need, I'll show you. So it's better to you'll see inshallah. Important rulings: only females should give also to females.
So you said it's communal obligation. So is that the people who are in the room who have actually witnessed the death?
No, the whole community.
Oh, I see. Right.
The whole community. It's like i'tikaf. It's a communal obligation. Sunnah. It's like janaza as well. It's a communal obligation. You have to do that janaza namaz. So certain people have to do that. So if a person, a new Muslim dies in an older hospital and nobody knows about it, he's cremated, everybody will question about that. So it's quite an important thing, and especially nowadays, a lot of people convert to Islam just before on the deathbed. So important rulings that a woman should only give ghusl to women. Women in the state of hayd and nifas should not do ghusl. They can be present in the room, they should not get involved in the ghusl, practicing the ghusl. At least 4 to 6 people. Now, that depends again on the size of the body of the deceased. We have hoists now. We have a hoist now, and we hardly ever use it because we have about 6-7 people giving the ghusl. But if it's a very large person, it's good to have a hoist. Again, like I said in the beginning, always you consider the safety of yourself and the ease of the deceased as well.
With regards to women giving ghusl on their days, during COVID, we had an issue where we were struggling with volunteers. So, with sister volunteers. So, there were sisters who were actually on their days and they couldn't, obviously the default masala is that they shouldn't give the ghusl. But then inquired from many muftis, gave the answer that they are allowed to.
Again, like I said, so we've had the similar situation, but what we tend to do is that, the sisters that are our usual volunteers, they'll just advise everybody else what to do. But again, you look at individual situations. If there's nobody else available or there to give the ghusl, the rights of that person, that is more important than this, so it's fine, it's understandable.
Also, Molana, regarding Tayammum, what happened with us in Chester?
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, so again, same about ghusl, and I was talking about during COVID, and even till now, a lot of masjids now are still not giving ghusl to mayyats. We've had situations where people, masjids have just given tayammum over the coffin box, saying that it's shaheed. I remember when we went to Chester, they were saying they just give tayammum over the body bag. So it's, but alhamdulillah, since we've started, since pandemic, we've always given ghusl to everybody. So we've had, because deceased coming from out of town, we whistle them until they take them out of town back to for the burial. But tayammum is only allowed on situations where there's no water available, or where the person is that burnt or badly. I mean, we had last year, wasn't it? Yeah, a lady was burnt in a house. Her body was totally dishonoured, so water was not. You can't even put water on there at all. So they had to do tayammum. I don't even think they did full tayammum even, because she was totally burnt. Just last year, beginning of last year. So tayammum is not allowed over the coffin, neither over the body bag. That's not allowed. That is not allowed at all. Now, this is important, position of the bodies. Now, if you are making a ghusl room, how we determine qibla for the Jamaat Khana, a lot of masjids forget this, that it is better to keep the legs toward the qibla than the face. It's better to do that. So always try to position the taps and the drainage this way. Remember that if you're making a ghusl room in the masjid, remember this, that sometimes we've had a situation very awkward. I know it's not farz, but this is a sunnah and a recommendation that either the feet or the face should be towards the qibla whilst giving the ghusl. I'm not going to go through this step by step, but we'll show it practically, inshallah. The kafan. Now the kafan, we have pre-packed kafans. So what we do is that we have male ones and female ones packed over. We always have about 60 in stock. We put them out ourselves. So every 4 or 5 months, we'll hold a workshop and practical workshop to how to cook kafans and how to pack them. So in each kafan, so the male one it has the lifafa, the izar, the qamis, and 3 strips, and the female one has a full thingy. Now what we do is we put them to 8 foot. We put them, all of them to 8 foot. If a person is taller, then we have rolls there to thingy. So I remember, was it 3 weeks ago, we had a lady. She had an illness. We had to get a 36-inch coffin, very big. So we used the lifafas as the izar. Our lifafas are very big. Our lifafas are like double, usually about 3.5 meters long. The width of it is very big, our lifafas. So we use lifafas as izars and qamis, because that's how big she was. But depending on the situation, you look at it and then you do that. But our coffins are quite 8 foot. Most of them will fit that. Most people are 6 foot, maximum 6 foot, 6'2", 6'5". It will fit that. It'll give enough space there. So if you're doing a pre-packed coffin, do it at 8 foot, 8.5 foot, and you'll be okay. I know some people question that, they've said to me that it's wastage of material. But when you're going to have 2-3 ghusls a day, it's just impossible to have time to cook coffins. So that's why you have to have the, and when you get people to come out of town and say that, can we have coffins? Because that reason, you have to have pre-packed coffins like this. Some masjids I've seen, what they do, they have a full ghusl pack. They have the towels, the black cloths and everything together to do that. That's fine also, but we don't do that because we have drawers there for everything there. This is how you lay the coffin. Okay, so the bottom one is a lifafa, then the izar, then the qamis. That's how you lay the coffin. Where like the ghusl room we have is quite big, so we have a prep table. We have a table after we wash the body. We bring it to the prep table. We lay the coffin on the prep table, and we put the body on that, and we just prepare it. Some masjids, they don't have the space, so they lay the coffin inside the coffin box. So what they do after the ghusl, they just transform the body into the coffin box, whilst the shroud is already laid in the box, and they just wrap it inside the box and put the lid back on. We have a prep table because sometimes we have shroud burials, we have coffin burials. So laying the coffin, this is how it is. So you put the strips down first, then the lifafa, then the qamis, then the izar. This is for women. You can do it either way. Either way, you can put the qamis first or the izar, whichever way. Then the 2 extra pieces for ladies, khimar and sinaban, and then you wrap it up like that. Okay? If the deceased person was in a state of ritual impurity, then the washing of the mouth and nose would be obligatory. Now, in COVID situations, in the beginning when we first started, we used to use dental. These are dental sponges or cleaning thing. And these are really good because the sticks are quite long, as well as it's sponge, it's not wool. So we used to soak it in water and just wipe the mouth like that. So the farziyat is done. But because in the beginning of when the pandemic started, it was said that it's an airborne thing and it's been contracted from the deceased. So we started putting pads or putting wool inside the body and putting tape on top. Straight away after that, washing just rinsing the mouth or wiping the mouth with the sponge. But if a person is in the state of janaba before or after COVID, you have to rinse the mouth fully as well as the nose. So you have to do the full ghusl.
Do you take teeth implants before or after rinsing the mouth?
The teeth, no, you take them out. But like I said to you, if it's possible to take them out, you take them out. If you cannot, leave them in. But when I say that rinsing the mouth, it does not mean it has to go all the way to the throat. Just as much as you can do. If a person died during childbirth, we leave that. Now, camphor is used to preserve the body from insects and other creatures. So kafur, that's why we use kafur. I mean, ulama say that some say that you can use other things as well. But camphor is very good; it preserves the body for longer. It is recommended that those who perform the washing should take a bath after performing the ghusl. There is no Islamic teachings of reading the Quran or making any special dhikr during the ghusl. So whilst during the ghusl, there's no thing in the kitabs to say that you should read this dua or read this Quran. Some people play a tape or the mobile phone with the Quran recited behind it. There's no such thing as that. It's a place of impurity. There should not be any Quran in the first place. Should we go through this or not? Should we do this? This is for stillbirth and childbirth. Again, like I said, Mullah's got the slides. Please, you can go through that yourself. It's quite simple. If a child dies at certain ages, what to do in this country. Requirements for stillbirth, again, the stillborn. So that's we come to the janazah prayers now. Now, if you want me to go through the practical way, I can do that, or we can do it at the end. Okay. Can I just get a couple of volunteers to think it, so then we can. About 4 or 5 will do. Yeah. Just move that fridge. You know that table? Just move that table. Go to the side. No, the whole table, yeah? The whole table.
I'll carry it.
So what we do is that we have since COVID. I'm going to need you again, yeah? Just one second. Okay. So since COVID, our Muslim parishes we've divided into different groups. So we have dispatch, we have drivers, we have different groups. So our family liaison, Mullah Shakil, he'll sort out all the paperwork. Then the drivers will go and pick the body. So when we go to pick the body, we have a stretcher. We have this stretcher. This is a one-man stretcher. So one person can go and pick a body. It's a very good stretcher. But underneath that, what we have is this is called a scoop. This yellow thing you see is called a scoop. Okay. We recently bought this. We've got a metal one as well. When we have shroud, I haven't bought the metal one with us. We have a similar thing. We use a metal when we have a shroud burial. We carry the body on the metal. We pick it up on all sides. 4 or 5 people pick it up. So we put the scoop on top of the stretcher, and then we just. So when you go to the mortuary, you take out the scoop and the stretcher, and this the body cover, and you go to the mortuary. And the mortuary staff, they transport the body onto them. They check the wristband, knee, and you sign the paper, and you take the body out. That's it.
And it's very important that we check the name.
Yeah, it's very important. We've had situations where we nearly buried, they gave the wrong body, we washed the body, because we have different teams. So for example, if I go to pick the body up, I only know this person's name. When it comes to the table for ghusl, the ghusl team do not know who this person is. They just know a person's coming to give. So these sisters gave ghusl, and luckily it was my wife giving ghusl. And she asked, it was supposed to be a bereaved sister, she had no family. And then, so the names, this Muslim sister, she had a name which is a very classical name, shall I say, which sounded Eastern European. But then we found out she was from in the subcontinent as well. So we gave the ghusl, and then just about half an hour before, she goes, how old is this lady that died? I said, she was about 40 years old. She goes, this one was about 60. So then we contacted this mortuary and we find out that they're given the wrong body. So this is, we were going to bury this body. So it's very important. So now what they're doing now, we have forms that we sign, to both our side as well as the mortuary side have to sign that they're given the right body. This is very important. So if you don't have family members to take with you, to see the face, especially sisters, ladies, very important to check the names on the tags as well as on the books as well.
So usually one of the volunteers will get a green certificate.
So
we usually match it with that, with the tag, and don't rely on the stuff there. Rather check the paperwork that you have.
It's very
check
important.
the tag on the even if it's the brothers have gone and it's a woman, lady's body. In order to get this done properly, do check the tag.
So the body most of the time comes in a body bag like this. Okay? Body bag. So then they will come to transport the body, and then you come to these. So the volunteers, whoever it is, 2, 3 of them. So now what will happen is that we imagine this is a table, yeah? I've just found it. So we don't want to move the stretcher. So what we do, we put the stretcher on the side. So what we're going to do is a light thingy. We're just going to pick it up. Just pick the other thing. Just go to the side. So what we do usually is we just transport the body. Our table is quite similar height, very similar height to the stretcher. Our prep table is very similar height. So if you're making a janaza room, very important take this into consideration that everything should be in the similar height, where then it's easy to transport. Okay, so your table and everything. Now, what you see underneath you here, so imagine this is your ghusl table. So you have a drainage underneath. This wooden plank, sometimes people use, sometimes people don't. Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's called taht. Yeah, they call it taht in Urdu. Yeah? They sometimes use, sometimes don't. The brothers tend to use it. Our sisters don't use it. The table we have is quite good. I mean, the drainage is very good in that. If you don't have good drainage on your table, it's better to use this because you have a bit of a level, so the water level will up to here. So that if there's any impurity, at least it's underneath the duct. It's not touching the body. If the drainage is good, then you don't really need this. Okay? The second thing we have, this is called a slide. We bought this just last year. It's only a piece of plastic, but very expensive. I don't know why. So what happens to that is basically, we don't use this for ghusl. So when it comes to, for example, transporting the body from this to the prep table, so you put this underneath and you pull the body. So you've got handles there. This is at the front, you can see, you've got handles on each side. Yeah? So instead of touching the body and picking it physically up, all you do, because your prep table and your ghusl table is a similar height, so you put it on that, and about 3, 4 brothers will hold it and just put the whole thing. Yeah? And when it comes to the ghusl table, then what you do is that you imagine you just do this. So 3, 4 brothers stand here, they pick the body up, and then others will just pull it out. This is very good for that reason. Especially if it's because touching the satar, it's very, very important to remember that. So we just put that here for demonstration purposes. But for ghusl, you don't put the slide underneath. Okay? So the body will come on this, and then you prepare the volunteers to do ghusl. So you guys are doing ghusl yet? Put some gloves on, and mask on, and now we have, whilst they do that, come on this side. Whilst they do that, we have we have different types of PPEs that we use. These are dental aprons that most of the sisters sometimes they use. They're quite good for sisters because they can get covered all the way. So dental aprons, so that way it goes in there when at the back they just get things. So some sisters they use normal ponchos, disposable ones. Well, brothers and a lot of sisters they use normal aprons, gloves, surgical gloves, and masks. Even obviously during COVID, they're wearing masks. After COVID or before COVID, they used to wear just surgical gloves, aprons, and no mask. Some people do wear masks. That's fine. So after the ghusl team is ready, so then we come to the body. Usually we have about, we allow about 4 or 5 family members and 2 of our volunteers. So about 7 people we allow for ghusl in the room. So then you can just wear a mask on the top, so that's you don't need to wear it. You want to wear it?
So one of the reasons why we wear PPE is not because of COVID. The face mask is for COVID, and like Mulana said, the COVID doesn't really transport from the deceased to the person. It's more of the volunteers standing next to each other because they're not following social distancing.
Not from the same bubble.
The reason why we're wearing aprons and gloves is because the body is in the state of janabat, and like Mulana said, sometimes they do leak out urine, stool, blood, so there will be splashbacks. So that's one of the reasons why we wear that. And another reason why we have a ghusl after that, Mulana mentioned in his slides, is because once you give ghusl, and your brother Mufti Mujahid have actually said this, I've done 6 ghusls with him and I've learned so much from the brothers. Mufti Mujahid have said, once you do ghusl, your own body becomes heavy. Now once you do ghusl on yourself and you come back, your body becomes relieved. That's one of the reasons and one of the wisdoms behind doing a ghusl on yourself as well after completing the ghusl.
So
I think a lot of people still think there's a government guidelines for having the COVID ghusl. So is there any government guidelines?
See, alhamdulillah, within our groups, our protocols are always checked by, we've got 2-3 solicitors in our groups as well as doctors and even counsellors. Alhamdulillah, our services last year won the Mayor's Award in Burnley. That's how we got to that. So we've been given ghusl since the pandemic started. Always we've given ghusl. We've even allowed, as time went by, we changed our protocols. In the beginning we used to allow 2 family members. Now it's come to 6 family members we allow. So it depends what it is. So that no way in the whole of the pandemic has there been any guidance from the government to say that you're not allowed to bathe the deceased. Yeah. What has changed is that where in the beginning it said that COVID can be contracted from deceased, that's changed over the time. But we still take precautions for our own safety and the safety of everybody else. Okay? The guidelines is, like Mulana said, that we wear masks not because of the deceased, because of the individuals around there. Okay? So that after the body has come to the ghusl table, so this group, what happens is that so we have so what happens is that you just click it on both sides. And it just comes off. That's it. So the benefit of that is that if it's a female disease, you don't have to touch the body. Before, when we never used to have that, we had to get the mahram to the family members to pick the body up and pull it out. Sometimes it's quite difficult. This is a good investment to have a school. It's easy to be out. So then what we do is that we open the body bag, and whoever's giving ghusl only are allowed in the room. The rest of everybody else exits the room. So we open the body bag. And at that time, we always have 3 bins. In our ghusl room, we have 3 bins. We have 1 bin for the deceased clothes. Another bin we have for the towels and the satar covers that we use. And the last bin is for the PPE to be disposed. So we have 3 bins. But then we dispose of them in chemical bins. The council takes that once every 1 week or 2 weeks. Now, before this, so you have to have the bins ready. So you have all that ready anyway. You have the agarbatti burnt as well. Yeah.
The moisture inside the bag.
Yeah. So when you open the body bag, especially if it's been in the morgue for more than 24 hours, especially if it's more, you have condensation within the body. Now this body bag does not have a waterproof lining. Most of the body bags that come from the hospital has a waterproof lining in. So there's always moisture within there. So be very careful not to touch that. That can be dangerous for you. That's why we wear PP and so forth, yeah? So before we, before we open the body bag, so we have the beds ready, we put our PPE on, we put agarbatti on, we lay the coffin on the table, or on our prep table. Should I open a coffin or should I leave it? Okay. We'll use the other prep table, yeah? So like I said, so you get 3 strips inside there, yeah? So 1, 2, 3, so 1, middle, and then end. So depending on the size, sometimes if you get a large person, so you use two of them, you tie them and for their stomach side, yeah? So this is already packed like this. Where you just open it up, see the head side. So it's already packed and cut. So that's the qamis. There, look. So you might, there's different colours of, or different material types, because there's different sizes. We don't waste material. So we buy small material sizes for the qamis, there's slightly middle size for the lifafa, and the extra large one for the qisa. Sorry, the other way around. So this is the qamis, look, it's cut into half. A hole is already made there for the head. So what we do is that we put that on here, and then that will open up. So the head will go here. So after the ghusl, once you transport the body, you just put the body on this, and you just put it in there. Inshallah, we'll go through that.
Well, now you've put the head that side, so the feet's facing towards the qibla. Is that why you've done that?
Not necessarily, no, we just did that for the demonstration. But like I said to you before, it all depends on how your ghusl room is designed. Yes, it's good to do that, but if, I mean, coincidentally that's happened, alhamdulillah. It all depends on your ghusl room, how it's designed. It's not necessarily, ours is alhamdulillah designed like that. It faces the qibla, the one we use. Some people do it towards the head side, people do it to the feet side, whichever volunteers prefer which way. So you prepare the coffin now, and then you get agarbatti, so incense sticks, and you have a stand. So once you can do a duni, which is called, you go around the body and the coffin just to fragrance everything, the room. We always burn one before the deceased comes into the room, so the room smells a little, and we disinfect the room as well, obviously, as well. So you burn one of these and you take another one and just go around. Or you can use bakhur burners, you can get electric bakhur burners, or you can get the coal ones. What also you need to prepare is camphor. So they call them, in English they call them mothballs. You can buy them in normal stores, online you can buy them. It's quite difficult to find you online actually. On normal Asian stores you can buy them. Because now they make the wooden mothballs. They're not used to us, but they get the camphor ones, and you crush them in pestle and mortar. You get about 4. For one ghusl, about 4 is enough. 3 or 4 is more than enough. So these are, and then you need 2 pieces of opaque cloth. So we have black, blue, brown, we have different color ones, but whichever was available to be black ones. 2 cloths you need. Also, I had an ihram somewhere. The sisters especially, they use ihram. So if the reason why you use ihram is if you don't have a slider, or you get a beach towel, the big towels, you can put the beach towel underneath. So what they do, they raise the body like this, and they slide the little bit of the towel, and they raise the body that way, and they pull the body up. So then what happens is when they're putting the body towards for the prep table, it's much easier then. Some sisters do that. So this is what we have prepared. Now, especially with COVID now, we have situations where there's catheters or there's tubes within the body left. Yeah. So for catheters, we have these syringes. Now the syringes, they're 10 mil. These are actually prescribed syringes. I mean, you can't really buy them over the counter. So we get supplied by a pharmacist, so he gets it for us. The reason why we get these is because usually we've tried all sorts of syringes. This is the best size for catheter tubes, and you get a good size to take all the fluid out, the impurity out. So you just put it in and you take as much as fluid out. Do it a couple of times on the catheter, so then take all the impurity out. Then you take the catheter out. Only remove the catheter, only remove any tube, shall I say, if you are trained. Alhamdulillah, we've got training. I'll send again a video to one of some sisters, nurses from Blackburn Hospital. They did a training on how to remove catheters and the tubes from the body on a deceased. So you can learn from that. It's quite a similar thing. But if you cannot remove it safely, leave it. Just cut it and leave it. So sometimes you have air tubes, sometimes you have catheters.
Sorry, just before you carry on, you know the incense and the mothballs, just explain what's the reason for that?
Okay, so this is preparing. So mothballs, you know, when we wash the body, remember we said camphor. So camphor decreases the decomposition of the body. So in the last wash, what we do, we mix the camphor powder inside the bucket of water, and then we wash the body with that. The incense stick is just for the smell and to give a fragrance to the coffin. So you just the room and the coffin. Yeah. So again, as well, so what happens is that when a COVID body comes as well, is that so the first thing we do is when we open the body bag, they will have their clothing on. So you get scissors and you cut the coffin off. Now to remove the body bag is the first thing we will do. So when we remove the clothes, always remember this. Okay, always remember this, that to cover the satar is farz in for the deceased. So if you come with here. So to cover the satar for a man, again, the same thing as from the belly button to the knees, but we tend to cover it as much as we can. Okay, so usually this covers from the shoulders to the ankles at least. But for the sisters as well, we have bigger ones, so you should cover all the body as well. So always you should have at least two people holding the. One of you hold this. Yeah, always have two people or two people holding this. Okay, so and then the other four people will underneath take all the clothes off. Okay, either with scissors or just take the clothes off. But it's very important to remember that the satar it's first to cover the satar. So the people giving the ghusl should not be looking. Neither you should be exposed at all. Okay. So after you've done that, so then we remove the thingy, the clothes as well as the body bag. Then remember the male's satar, it can be up to here. Some people prefer you can do this. Some people now in COVID situation, some saying that you shouldn't relieve the person from istinja. Remember this, that the ghusl of the deceased is the same as ghusl of the living. The only thing is that somebody else is giving the ghusl and the living person does the ghusl himself, but with certain differences. So one is that if it's a COVID death, like I said, you don't need to rinse the mouth fully. You just get the dental thingy and you rinse, just wipe the mouth and the nose like that. That's it. And you throw that in the bin. Straight away you have a pedal bin, you throw that away. Then you should do this. So you lift the body slightly, you lift the body slightly and you press the stomach for any excretion to come out. Yeah? Any dirt. So first thing you do is the istinja. Yeah? And then what we use is these. These are disposable bed mats. Some people in the olden days, and especially still now, they use normal cloth to istinja for the person. So we cut these into four. We cut into 4 strips, and then you just wrap it around your hand, because this side's absorbent and this side's waterproof. So you wrap it around your hand, and then you perform istinja on the deceased. You clean any dirt, and then you wash it. Okay. So that's the first part done. After which, if there is possibility of giving wudu to the deceased, then we can do that. You wash your hand, just literally if you can. If you cannot, then you should leave it. The reason I'm saying if you cannot is because sometimes you have tubes. Now, if the body is bleeding, of course, or bleeding, then what we have is 4 types of plaster and also pads. Now, if the mouth is bleeding, we tend to use sanitary pads over wool, because the wool tends to stop inside the residue stays around the mouth. With sanitary pads, so you put sanitary pad on, and then we have different types of medical tape. So just medical tape on top. Sadly, sometimes we have to, so it all depends on each situation, how it is. So the various types of medical tapes you can have. Then, so even within the body as well, if there is places where there is blood or pus coming out, you do the same thing. We also have these plasters. Here, sorry. Here. Now these are strips. I mean, we've used them a couple of times. They're not the best of all things. They stop bleeding straight away. They're the plasters. It's like a gel. It's like a gel strip. So for the nose, if the nose is bleeding, we put this inside the nose, and it clogs the nose up for a short while. It clogs the nose up. And so we have the strips for the nose, and there's plasters for the body. So these are like a special gel type thing. It becomes a gel and it just freezes up a little. And if there is plasters on the body, we have these sprays that it removes the plasters, so it doesn't cause any harm to the body. So you spray over the plaster, it just comes off, peels off straight away. Very good spray this. So these are some items that you may require, but the most ones are obviously cotton wool, water, towel, and stuff like that. That's it. So after you've given istinja, you use the disposable, the bedding thingy, you wash the excretion off, and you wash the excretion. Then you can start the ghusl. We've got a shower head as well as the buckets. So different volunteers use different things. Some volunteers use the buckets. We have 3 buckets. So you fill the buckets up. You wash the right side and the left side, and you just wash them from. You start from the head. Sorry. So you can use. We use shampoos, normal Radox or shampoo or different types. Whatever you prefer. Some people use soap. However you give yourself a bath, give the bath to the deceased as well. Any questions so far? Anybody? So then you just. G. So everything is done 3 times as we do it normally. So you wash the head, then you wash the right side, the left side. That's it. And then last wash, you just wash with camphor. You just wash with camphor. That's it. And then you get most of the time you need. Remember, all this time, somebody is always covering the sadr. Yeah. So this will be wet. So after that, after the ghusl is done, so then what happens again? You just get another thing, and you get 2 towels, and you wipe the body. You wipe the body. For 2 volunteers, you hold this one. So whilst these are wiping the body, you move this sadr cover, which is wet, and you cover it again with another sadr cover. Yeah, which will be dry because this one will be they'll be wiping it dry. Yeah. So after this all dry up, what happens is that then if you put the slide on it, or some people what they do is they put the towel, a beach cloth or a ihram to pull the body to the prep table. If you don't have a prep table, you have a coffin. So you just bring the coffin here and you pick the whole body with the towel or the beach towel or the ihram. It's much easier. So you hold each side and you think. Sometimes if you are designing, our prep table is quite wide. It's about this wide. It's about nearly 1.5 feet wide. It's too big. It's about nearly over 1 meter wide. It's used for all types of bodies, big and small. But I tend to think that if the prep table is smaller, it's much easier to move around. But that's how it is. But it won't be fit for everybody. So after you've dried, we take the body to the coffin. So should we?
So do you know when you're doing the washing, is it underneath?
Yeah. So always we have to do
throughout the whole way.
All the way. So after you can do with the shower head or the water or the juice. Sorry, just like that. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Always you have to have the body covered. So the male sadr is from the belly button, and the female sadr is from the top.
I just want to add on that as well. So when we do rotate the body this side, a lot of the time the back side's exposed. Yeah, it's a very bad habit, and a lot of volunteers are just staring. And they don't understand the farziyat of what Maulana said about covering. So what we tend to do is when we turn the body, so imagine what Maulana would turn the body to our side, we'll put most length on this side.
Yeah.
So that when we pull the body, the long side covers the back as well.
Yeah. It's the thing is with the ghusl, what happens is that you have. I tend to do is put one lead person who knows what to ghusl, and the rest of them as just normal people who don't know anything. That way it's much easier because one person can advise everybody else. When you have 2-3 people who know and 4 people who don't know, then it becomes a bit of a fight. Okay, so if you work together, then you can give that final rights very well. You know, so is there a way of bringing that here, or should we just bring the table?
Just bring it,
Yeah,
It's
bring the
going to
table.
be difficult.
If you move that table that way.
Yes.
Yes. So imagine that we're moving the coffin here, or we're moving this whole thing here. And what we're going to do is, so the slide, if you go to the side, brother, if you go to the side, I mean, if it's a light body, you can do this, you can do it quite easily. If it's a heavy body, so just pull this, here, pull the whole thing. So we just pull the whole thing out, yeah? That's it. So then the body is still uncovered. So what we do, we get the khamis. Or should we take the thing out?
You'll have to take the slide
Yeah,
off.
okay. So we'll take the slide off. Just pull that. So we hold the body like this on this side. Up to this corner. That's it. We take that off. Yeah. So still the setup cover is on. We don't move the setup cover yet. So then khamis will run over.
With the head.
So you put the khamis on top. So most of the time the khamis will cover until at least the private parts.
So usually, if the head doesn't fit through,
So you just rip it.
you can just rip through it.
Yeah. So look, can you see it covers most of the setup. So we can, on this occasion, we can actually take this out now. It's covered below the knees. So then what you do is the first covering, so the right side first.
Well, is there a science to why you've said the right side first? So which part of the cloth should there be at the end? Because obviously there's a few layers there, isn't there?
Yeah. So it's just because obviously we start everything good with the right, and then the left, right, so right. That's it. There's no it's not. It's just if somebody doesn't do it, you can't say, oh, it's wrong. But if it's a mistake, it's best to do it like the right and the left. So we try to squeeze it as much as possible. So then the arms, the hands, the arms are squashed into the body. Okay. So again, this side down. You pull this side up. So the first part is the qamis, then the lifafa. Sorry, izar. So the qamis should be from the shoulders minimal to the knees. We do it below the knees. Yeah, it should be minimal to the knees. And the izar should be from the shoulders again to at least the ankles, at least that much. Okay, it should cover the. Yeah, that's the recommended thing. But obviously the knees should be, it covers the private parts. If somebody doesn't have any coffin at all, yeah. And then the last part is the lifafa, which is the covering. That should be covering the whole head as well as the feet. So again, we do the side.
Is also quite tight on the body as well?
Yes. So we try to keep the arms as close as possible, yeah, to the sides. So that if it's longer, so you just put it underneath. Yeah, slightly. That's falling. Just put that. So now basically we've got to the. Yeah. So remember the 3 strips we put at the beginning. So what we do is we try to, if it's too long, we twist the edges and just tighten here. So here. Yeah,
Just twist it.
Yeah.
So usually you double knot it.
And then just to the middle, same thing. Like I said before as well, if the person's stomach is big, so you need to the two strips, you just tie it up on the 2 strips. So now the body has been washed and shrouded. Now if the family want to see the body or the face, you just uncover the front. I think. Now we forgot one thing. That's not. So a lot of people. Some people do it, some people don't. Itar. Now itar. Some people say that you should put it at the place of sujood. Some people do that. Some people don't. Yeah, we do that. So after the ghusl, just before when you lay on the prep table, what we do, we get the normal itar bottle. Some itar, and then you just wipe some on your hand and put it on the forehead and the hands and arm, the place of sujood, preferred action, but it's not really.
Should you use a spray ether, or is it best to put it on your hands and then apply it?
Either. It's just to set the body.
Can I just add to something? In Oldham, because we don't have set cleaners, so most of the time, I'm saying 100% of the things that we do is we would get the coffin and we wouldn't place it how this is placed. What we would do is we would actually put it parallel this way.
Yeah.
And this is very important because carrying the mayyat can be difficult.
Yeah.
Right? And some cases we've seen where they've actually put the coffin parallel in this side,
And
then they've struggled, and to the extent that there's a possibility of dropping the mayyat.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the most difficult thing to do when giving the ghusl is actually shifting the mayyat's body from the wash bed to the coffin. So that's where everyone needs to be really careful. There's possibility of dropping the mayyat. There's also possibility of exposing the mayyat's body, the satar. So that's why if an individual can't carry something that's heavy, don't put yourself forward.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they try and I'm going to use this word, they try and be heroes. And then they've done a little bit and they've actually let go.
Yeah.
So it's best not to even put yourself forward. We need to, the individuals who are the strongest, they need to and carry the shoulder and the hip side. And those individuals who we have who might struggle to carry the mayyat, then we give them on the feet side. One individual has to be holding the head though, right? And if we can have the coffin right in front of the head side, so then you take the mayyat from the bed, from the wash bed, directly into the coffin. That's better. Another thing that obviously with regards to the coffin, what we do here is we ensure that we're folding the left side first and we leave the right side on top. I think that's what the fiqh books mention.
Okay.
So we normally leave the thingy and we do the itar either on the wash bed or we just do it in the coffin when we get into the coffin. But another thing what Maulana Jumail mentioned there about the satar, this is very important. A lot of families, especially what we've seen in our communities, is we like to allow the entire family to come into the ghusl khana, right? And they say, oh, Maulana, they won't do anything, they're just going to watch. Ghusl is not something that you should be watching anyway. So, you see, and the reason I'm mentioning it now is because it's so sensitive that you can't mention it then. So what we tend to do is, there are those who listen to us and there are those who want to do it their way. And we're not going to be walking off from anyone's ghusl, so we just give it. But the sad reality is if the whole ghusl khana is filled with family members, they've all seen the mayyat satar. So is that something that we want to do? That's very shameful if an individual has kept themselves covered all their lives and now here you have family members standing around. And it's not only about the satar. In the ghusl khana, there's a lot of things that happen that Maulana would mention that we should never speak about after we've given a ghusl. And that's why we need to remember that it's an amana. Those who give the ghusl, it's an amana that after you've come out of that ghusl room, you should never talk about what happened in there. And the reason why we say, because it's like Farhan asked, what's the wisdom behind the agarbatti? Is because the individuals we're going to have to empty an individual's bowel for them. Their bowels, and it becomes smelly, right? So we should never ever assume that the individual wasn't pious, that's why this has happened. Aisha radiallahu anha says that I used to think that people who would go through a difficult death, they weren't living a pious life. And when I observed the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's when I realized, no. You know, death is a painful experience. And same with ghusl. We all relieve ourselves in this world, and when an individual will pass away, there will be. And some individuals, alhamdulillah, before they leave the world, what happens is they know my time is close. So what they would do is they would always keep their bowels empty. Right? So it doesn't matter how much we press and massage. And when it comes to massaging as well, and this is very important, you know, a lot of the times we're given ghusl and guys are just like doing this. You know, they're just doing this. And obviously at that time you can't say to them, brother, do it properly. Right?
But the whole purpose of ghusl is to remove dirt and it is to clean the individual, the mayyit, right? But they're doing this, and when it comes to massaging the stomach as well, I'm sorry to say, but it has to be needs to be done firmly, because the firmer we do it, the impurity will come out, right? But some family members, they don't like it that you're handling the mayyit in a harsh. It's not a harsh manner. We're doing it for the mayyit so that everything is so that we're completely clean, isn't it, Master?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Right. Sorry about that.
No, Jazakallah for that thing. But you know, whatever we're showing is nothing to see. If there's ever a ghusl, try to get involved. Not to see, but to practically get involved in the ghusl. That's the only way to learn, should I say. But like the reason I showed it like this is because our ghusl is like that. But what I say, if you put the stretcher this way, it's much easier because you're not you're spreading the weight out between people. It's much easier to move. But another thing that you can also get is a hoist, which has straps underneath it. He picks the body. It's just a motorized hoist. We've got one. We've never used it. We never used it because the sisters have used it once only. But so what we do with the hoist is that we have there's already straps on the hoist, but we replace the straps with the cover straps. So what we do, we just attach them and then pick the body with them straps and then leave the straps in there. But we have a portable one. You can get the ones which are built in on top of the ceilings, and it moves the body quite easily as well. But straight after that, inshallah, so after you do the itar and the coffin, seeing the face, then you transport the body. If it's a shroud burial, we have another scoop that we put on. We don't use.
What you mean by shroud burial?
Okay.
Yeah, we just call the shroud.
Okay. No, so the cemetery actually called the cemetery. That terminology comes actually from the cemetery. So they always ask, is it a shroud burial or a coffin burial? So the burials, in fact, in this country, we have two types of burials. We either have without the coffin, with the coffin. Without the coffin is called a shroud burial because you're just burying the deceased with the shroud. You see the coffin, you have the coffin box as well on top. In terms of graves, there's three types of graves as well. There's a natural grave, there's a wooden timber grave, and then there's a vault grave. So most of us would have a natural grave, which has a bit of piece of wood on the side just to hold the soil. But some places, I think Chester, I don't know what Chester. I think Blackwood sometimes have a wooden timber. So all the bottom, the side, and the top is all wooden.
Berry.
Timber thingy.
Berry's got it as well.
That's berry as well, yes. Yeah.
We have in Oldham.
In Oldham as well, so what we do is it's also got they use slabs.
Planks. Is it wood? Is it wood or
Wooden.
Is the floor also wooden? No, so that's not a good grave. That's not a timber vault. A timber vault, the floor is wooden, the sides are wooden, and the top is wooden. The whole four sides, right to the top. A vault grave is where the bricks, the bottom is paved, the top is the four sides are breeze blocks, and the top is paved as well. Berry has that?
I was like a concrete.
It's like a concrete shell. So what in Nelson what they do, they dig about 100 meters from a factory. A crane just puts it in like that. They just cement it. So then there's about 20-30 always ready like that. So these are the three types of graves. But councils prefer to sell the vault graves because they make more money on that. It's more easier for them. Secondly, also is that yes, certain situations where, like for example, in Rotterdam and Hazard, they have a lot of water on, so they can't have normal graves, so they have to have a vault. But what happens with that is that we have to understand that the decomposition of the body. So if it's a shroud burial, it decomposes very easily because the natural soil touches the body quite easily. But if it's in a coffin, most of our coffins are veneer wood, so it's waterproof as well. So that will take a few years to rot and decompose. Then the natural soil touches the body. But in that meantime, it just imagine having it's like an apple having in a jar, closed jar. So there's no, it's like that. But if it's a vault one, it's more compact because it's all breeze blocks and cemented. There's no natural decomposing at all there. So it takes longer to decompose when it's more harsh on the deceased. So keep that in mind,
I think a lot of people, they think it's sensitive. They think that they're not fulfilling the haq of the mayyit by putting the mayyit in the soil. And we, sadly, the dua that we read is minha khalaqnakum wa fiha nu'idukum wa minha nukhrijukum taratan ukhra. And the reason we say minha khalaqnakum is because we're created from the soil and we're going into the soil, but we don't want to put our mayyit into the soil. Right? And again, these are things that we need to educate ourselves before a janazah takes place in our family. We need to know that what is better for the mayyit. Our Ustad used to tell us that an individual who's buried in that coffin there, the one that's covered in green, they're the coffins that we bury in Oldham, isn't it? Right? Now, if you leave a mayyit in that coffin, then after how many years will that mayyit receive its haq of being decomposed, going back into soil? Because Allah says, and we will return you into it, that soil. And that's the whole purpose we bury, or else we should have done something else with the mayyit. But sadly, there are family members, they feel it's harsh to put the mayyit directly into the soil. We need to go out of that. And families need to have these conversations before a death even happens in the family. Because what we found is many a times in the Qabristan, the family debating that should we do thingy coffin or non-coffin. And I'll be very honest with you, we're not, our Ustads have taught us that in the Qabristan, never ever push your views. Just tell them that look, it's better, this is better, that's it, and leave it on to the family. So many a times we've done burial, and one thing I will tell you is these funeral directors, or if they're alims, alhamdulillah, if they're not alims, they don't care about the Islamic rites. They just, what is easy for them sometimes, and what is, quicker. Because it's a job. You get it done quickly. And we've had many experiences with this, where they will lie to the family and say you're not allowed to bury, whereas the local authority, the graveyard, they allow you to bury without a coffin, but they will say that you're not allowed to, because it's easier for them, because it's quicker, you see. Placing a coffin inside the grave is quicker. Ropes, you're in. Quickly, but whereas placing a mayyit in the graveyard sometimes can be difficult, right? And sometimes it's also, if the body is heavy set, then there's issues. So this is something that we need to educate ourselves. We need to understand that yes, it hurts placing our mayyit in the soil. That's better for the mayyit.
What happens if the mayyit is a female? She's a
in that case, obviously, you will bury with a coffin. However, if you bury with a coffin, you should leave the lid open. Should leave the lid open. Again, it's like what I've said. If you take an apple and you seal it up, that apple will not rot. You need to give it the environment of the soil. It's not necessary that it has to touch the soil has to touch the body to decompose the body. It's the environment. We should allow it and give it that environment.
So, Shakaya?
Why can't we? It's better. It's giving the entire body.
What the brother said, sometimes our local authorities don't allow that. They don't allow it. So sometimes we just move the lid a little bit and just open a little bit. Sometimes we move the lid. It all depends on the individual thing.
There has been a case in Oldham where once we did a burial where there was too much water inside the grave. There was too much water, and when you get a situation, all of this, the ghusl, the kafan, it's all situational. We have to look at the situation. One Maulana Sahib might say one thing today, might say something else. Now the Maulana Sahib has the knowledge, so he's okay to say it. Me and you might think, hey, why is he doing it different today for? He did it the other day. But they have the knowledge, that's why they can, and it's all situational, right? So In that case, you would say in the fiqh books there is a mention of tabut, burying inside a box, right? So if it's a situation like that where there are some towns in the UK where they don't allow coffin burials, the only reason they don't allow it is because the soil is not, it's mud, right? So in those cases, we can't be too stubborn and say we don't want a non-coffin, but then what we can do is leave the lid on.
Yeah, so after that, basically, we wash the body, we prepare the body in the coffin, the family have seen the face as well, so now we transport the body to the masjid. So depending on if it's a coffin burial, what we do now is, in Burnley we have one COVID center, so we use that masjid, we do the ghusl there, people come and see the face there, and then we transport the body to the individual masjid of choice, respective choice, and then we do the janazah there. So before we leave the ghusl area, we close the coffin, we tie it up, we put in the coffin box, and we actually seal the coffin as well with screws. And the reason why we do that is we've had situations, I mean, recently, a couple of months ago, quite a few months ago, we got banned from a cemetery. There was about over 100 people that came for the janazah, and then they opened the lid and to see the face. And obviously, with COVID, there's still speculation that it can be, COVID can be from the deceased also. So we had to, it was a bit of a struggle to get permission again for burial in that cemetery. So that since then, what we do, we seal the coffin from the ghusl area. We don't allow any more viewing of the face after that. So then we prepare for the janazah namaz. Before we go through the full janazah namaz, I mean, whenever we pray janazah, the imams tend to remind us about janazah namaz. But janazah namaz, one thing I will say is farz kifaya. It is a communal obligation. Again, remember what I said about a new Muslim that from the hospital, it's an obligation upon us as well. This is the position of the imam. Now the burial, this is what I'll go through. So after janazah namaz, we take the body in the hearse or in the van, and we take it to the again, carrying of the khabar. So there's also the discussion of should we go before the hearse or behind the hearse. There's both arguments on both sides. Now, obviously, now it's only 30 people allowed. How many? So there's the rewards of qiraat that the person attends the janazah namaz as well as the burial. The rewards of that. But take this into consideration, the fact that only a certain number of people are allowed. That if only 30 people go, you'll get the reward for that, because and then later on go and do some as well. We'll give you salams. It's fine. But look at the situation as well. Don't try to attend just because it's rewarding, but then you get in trouble from the local authorities. So the burial, carrying the body, there is no specific way in which the janazah should be moved. So what most of the burial sites that we go to, we tend to park quite closely to the grave. It's only literally about maximum we probably walked about 5 meters or 10 meters. So putting up the shoulders, it's quite it's more difficult than carrying it normally. So what we do is in some burial sites we have these strips of ropes. So we put the coffin on the ropes, and then we feed the ropes in the handle, and we lower the coffin inside if it's a shroud burial, like I said, we take the scoop and we put it in line with the grave. So we get 3 brothers to go into the grave, and 3 to just pick the body up and pass it on. Again, remember the satr here. Satr is not just about exposing the body, it's also about touching the body. So when you are carrying the body, you should not be try to not do it on the back, on the back, one person on the feet, one person on the head. That's it. If it's a female, if it's a sister, we have the blue ones you see at the back, waterproof. So we get brothers. Everybody else has to move back. Only the family members, and they hold a piece of cloth over the body, and the family members, they move the body underneath. So that's how much parda we give. Even though they have a kafan on, we still have to give that parda. Okay. So that's the burial. So whilst the burial, you lower the body. Now, our Ustad Mufti used to say that you should. So these are the 2 types of graves, Islamic that we have, lahad and a shape. In the Middle Eastern countries, or where there's the soil is very sandy, they have the lahad, the L shape. So they dig it and then dig across as well. So then they put the bodies like that. So sometimes they can have 3 or 4 bodies in a row. But in this country, ours is ship, just straight down. Now, how you see the janaza here, this one, now that's a timber vault. So both the sides are timber and the floor is timber. But most of the time, ours, what we have is just like a timber border that we have, and then you put timber planks on top. Now, you should face the body, the whole body, towards the qibla. So ulama say that you should take it towards the side of the qibla, of the grave. So if the qibla is towards this side, the body right towards, right towards the side, the edge of the grave, and you put soil underneath, and you sort of place the body on top. You cannot do that if it's in a coffin. So what you're supposed to do if it's a coffin burial is just face the head slightly tilted towards the qibla. That's it. You can't do the whole thing with the body like that. So if it's a shroud burial, so you put some soil underneath, and then you put the timber planks on top of the of the grave, and then you put the thing. Now in this country, that we do that with the timber planks. In the Middle Eastern countries or in the Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, we don't do the timber planks. We put soil on top straight away. So what happens in this country is that after, even within a day or two, the timber planks sink. Sometimes we've seen that the graves usually sink within a day and they go half. So they will top the soil up. It's just that because the soil is soft and then the timber planks slowly rot and they sink away. So that's the burial. Now, it's not to give, everybody should give 3 handfuls. Read that, recite that. And after the burial, there is that on the head side to read from Alif Lam to Muflihun, and then Aman al-Rasul to the end.
Is it the face that needs to be facing the Qibla or the whole chest of the mayyit?
The whole body. The whole body. Mufti Sabri Sahib said, he told us that you should put the body towards the edge of the grave and put the whole body. The whole body. If you can do that, if you cannot, at least put some soil underneath so the body is raised a little like that. Just slightly.
So if it's a coffin burial, and then what do you do then?
Then you
move the chest in the coffin, or
no, in the coffin. Yeah. In the coffin, before you tie the thing towards the right hand side, you just tilt the face, the head.
Could you not put anything under the body so the chest is facing towards the Qibla?
The coffin is obviously it's difficult. Like Mohammed said, normally the put the medias towards the Qibla. What we do here is, if it's only if it's possible, it goes from
we do that.
we place it in the coffin so that the medias is
slightly tilted.
I always best to tilt as much during COVID, especially because they never allowed us to do non-coffin burials. So we did that. We used to put
pillows
in the back. That would then allow the medias
to face it.
tilted so that we face it.
You know, just talking about the style, once the immediate place on the soil, like you say, you can cover with timber on the top, but there is what in time and soil fall on the immediate.
Sorry.
There'll be a shock
starting
there. If you put timber on top and soil on top of the timber, there will rot in time and the soil will fall on the So, I mean, should it be putting stones on that?
No. The whole point on the timber is what happens is that because this is a couple of things. One is some people. I remember once what we did without the timber. We did a burial, and somebody live streamed it. It was just last year. Somebody live streamed it on Instagram on that. People commented on that fact that it was hurting the mayyit.
So you put soil on the mayyit?
Yeah, we did that once, and they were saying it was hurting the mayyit. Yeah, so I'm saying it's the ignorance of our people because we're not used to it. We don't see that people think that you shouldn't do that. But that's the best way to do it. But in this country, In this country, they don't allow us to do that. We have to put a timber on top or something on top. But with the timber, what happened, like Maulana said, or I said as well, is that when it rots, at least the soil then touches the body. But when it falls, it's the soil, the natural way of decomposing, that comes into place then. Yeah? So filling the grave up, obviously nowadays they don't allow us to fill the graves up, which, but we take spades with us. Sometimes they do allow, sometimes they don't. But usually we fill the graves up ourselves. Now, this thing, repatriation, when you send the body back home, it goes through a lot of hardship, the body, embalming, then they put chemicals in, even this alcohol inside it, and then the way it's transported to the country, and then buried, it's delayed a lot, and then the haqq of the mayyit is not given fully. Again, try to read this about how embalming works. The last thing is about ta'ziyatan. Now, obviously, ta'ziyah is not allowed now because of COVID, but even to send a text message to somebody or looking at the timings as well, just give a phone call to somebody about condolences, it's good to do that. The visitors should engage themselves in recitation of Quran and dua. In the Bangladeshi community, we don't have this thing of the ta'ziyah of 3 days. In the Pakistani and the Indian community, they have that. In our communities, do they have that here? No. Which is sad, that is actually. Where you go for dua for 3 days, we don't have that in the Bangladeshi communities. In Pakistani and in the Indian, and even the Arab communities, sometimes they have that. But then again as well, what you should be doing when you go to these houses is not just engage in talk. Well, that's not wrong. To say that that's not wrong also. If somebody is, a friend of somebody's or a family member, to say stories or remind people of happy times, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So the whole reason when we go to these is for condolences, to send out condolences to the family members, and to say some sense of Isali Suwab, so we pray Quran, to the zikr, dua, and so forth. Period of mourning is the period of mourning for a woman whose husband has passed away shall be 4 months and 10 days. That's iddat. For any relative, the period of mourning shall be 3 days from the moment they passed away. So from the moment they passed away, not from the moment they buried. It's 3 days. After 3 days, that's against that. Then it becomes kulsha.
Sorry, Maulana Sahib, so I also heard that the wife or the husband who's passed away. So the husband has passed away. Is it true the wife cannot see the husband?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So because the marriage breaks then. I mentioned before that you have to look at situation. Every scenario is different. If it's going to cause family issues later on, then we have to bend the rules a little bit. If a person has not been seen for months due to COVID, we have to look at that. If it's going to cause her depression or anxiety, then we have to look at that. Or consult your imams, consult the ulama, and then advise you to do that. That is.
Even like great scholars from within our own fiqh, they allow it. Marriage is broken or terminated. Right word. It doesn't mean it's terminated in how it's terminated in the dunya. So it's very different with that. That's the reason why the idea these fatwas that they actually say that one can't show it. Because you can imagine the mental thinking that you want to a woman if you said to her that she's not allowed to see her husband after he's passed away. So I think there is a misunderstanding when it comes to some people say that the marriage has been terminated, so then that's why just how if a marriage was to be terminated in the dunya, then everything is finished and you and her become like their mother and you're not allowed to see and talk to one another. That's not the case. When we say that the marriage has been terminated, there's a different reason for why the marriage has been terminated. Because now the husband is allowed to, for example, but I think this is a question which a lot of people have asked.
Yeah.
A lot of people are under the assumption that the wife shouldn't see the husband after he's passed away, but majority of the ulama have actually given it.
Yeah, you cannot say it's not allowed. It's understandable. It's allowed. It's not totally allowed. It's not. It's both sides of the thing. This is one thing as the distribution of food. Now, if it's where, for example, when a person dies, the deceased family, the neighbors and the family members to provide food for the family only, for the family members, immediate family members only. That's something that we should be doing. To provide food for the whole community and the people that are coming for the ta'ziyat, there's nothing in that. Especially, you know, some of the sects, what they say, they take money from the deceased wealth, or whatever the rest of that, and then they pay for the food from that, thinking that that will be rewarding for the deceased. That's not allowed also. That's actually doing zulm on the children and the wife and everybody else who's going to get the inheritance from that. So the food-wise, distributing of food, you know, what we call shindi in the but there's no such thing as that. Providing food for the immediate family is a good thing. We should be doing that as neighbors or as family members. We should just make it in the household. That's it. Structures are on the graves. So now, again, in cemeteries now, obviously, if we go there, we find marble structures and big structures. This is one thing I forgot to say about what I was saying about. We're talking about teaching people about before having arguments within the cemetery. You know, what sad situation we've come to is that, you know, weddings, you know, if we have a cheap wedding, we look down upon. It's the same thing with janazas now. If you have a cheap janaza, we look down upon. Because a vault grave costs 3 times more than a natural grave. If a person gets buried in a natural grave, and he's from a higher caste, he's thinking, no, what's he doing? He's a cheap guy. He's getting a cheap send-off. It's not like that. Our Sharia teaches that. Save that money and give it to charity. Or, you know, you should be extravagant in that. So it's the same thing here as well. When it comes to the gravestone, you can buy a normal gravestone just to say that, okay, this person is buried here. But we have these extravagant gravestones which thousands of pounds are spent upon, just so people know where this grave is located. Visiting the graveyard, again, we know these are things we should be doing regularly. Visit the graveyard regularly, because it's good for the heart, it's good for Iman. Try and, at least once a week, if it's on the day of Jum'ah, try and go visit the graveyard and pray some Quran for the deceased. There's sunnah way, a dua that we can read when we go there, but what we should be doing is praying Quran as much as possible when we go there. One thing I will mention, when you visit the graveyard, try and avoid doing dua facing the grave. Face the Qibla and do the dua. Face the Qibla and do the dua. That's basically, the last thing is that obviously when you do come to the graveyard, you always wear, don't come to the graveyard. A lot of people come to the graveyard dressed to go to a wedding. Yeah? Come in clothing which is safe. For example, wearing Wellingtons or boots or dirty clothes. You don't wear white jubbas and all that. Yeah, so people then go on a hype, you know, and say that, no, I'll sacrifice the clothing, that's it. But then they go in the grave and it's dirty and so forth. It doesn't make sense. And also is that wearing gloves also. When you're wearing gloves, the way of taking our PPE, of disposing it properly. In the graveyard, in the cemetery, we do have metal bins. Try to keep it clean as possible. When we take our gloves off, be very careful how we take the gloves off, donning and doffing, taking our PPE off, all that stuff as well. That's basically it. And then the masjid as well, after the ghusl, we have a team, or we have a couple of brothers and sisters who disinfect the whole room, wash the wash table, clean the bins, so forth. But that's the hygienic, and you should be doing that. So these are some things that practically we can do, as well as the, you know, it might be different. So certain things will be different than us. Certain practices will be different. It's all situational, how your rooms are, how your councils are, and how everything else is within the masjid situation as well. Any other questions, anybody?
Yeah, this one thing I would like to seem to be encouraged, that is to perform the janaza outdoor, not in the mosques. I'd like to see the organisation and listen to put that forward every time there's a
in Blackburn, the cemetery has like a prayer room. It's not a prayer room, it's just like for janazas only. It's just like a metal shack. About 200 people can pray janaza namaz in there. So the cemetery has that. So what we do there is that we pray the janaza namaz straight to a burial. So certain councils have that. In Burnley we have it as well, but I think we've only used it once. It's a chapel, it's a multi-faith room. We're allowed to use that. So you should encourage your councillors. Voting is coming up. This is a good time to put that forward. You know, for a Muslim area and everything inside.
Only when it's large day and there's no.
The thing is, Uncle, the thing is, the sad reality is here is that as the Mayyat or whoever it is, we are attached to a certain masjid. That's the thing. Janazah should not be attached to a certain masjid. So, for example, if I'm from this masjid, my janazah has to be here. But this is the thing. We have to change that concept. See, in Blackburn, they've taken years, but they've changed that concept. In Blackburn, they have about 50. More 90% of janazahs take place in the Qabristan because they have a prayer room area in there. So this is the thing we should be working towards. That everybody pray. The janazah namaz should have been in the masjid in the first place. That's why certain masjids I've been to, they have before the mihrab, they have another room. Like in Medina, in Masjid Nabawi, they have it like that. They have another room where only family members, 6-7 family members are allowed, and the imams are allowed. That's it. Because that's outside the masjid. Obviously, this country where we have bad weather, we have these.
To be honest with you, what I found is the situation of the
exactly. Yeah.
Like for example, even on a good weather, sometimes you get a lot of people that attend the janazah.
Yeah.
Now, for example, some people have pushed for janazah in the car park where we found it really difficult because you can't even fit that many people. So that's the reason why we then looked back into the masajid to see if there's any reason and why, for example, the janazah, why was it that janazah should not be prayed in the masjid? It was mainly because of najasa, right? Because those of you who are from back home, you will know that there is possibility of, especially, back home, at the time of the research, they never had coffee like this where, so then if you bring a janazah to the masjid or in the masjid, and there was a possibility of getting the masjid because if anything was to fall. So, not to say, still there is karahiyah. Still there is karahiyah. There is, it's makruh to perform janazah in the masjid. But if there's no other alternative, then that makruh, that karahiyah disappears. Right? So, for example, to create ease for the community. Right? So, obviously, in Preston, in Blackburn, they have the type of shelter where it's not a masjid, but it's like a shelter. So, even on a rainy day, they can actually go and perform, and it's big enough. They've got good car parking space, so everyone can actually attend that janazah. But I think
it's not practical for everybody. I mean, it's not like your masjid doesn't have a big car.
No, so the ground there is small, the big enough.
I know that's
we've obviously recently we've started like the ground is there again only if it's possible within the times.
Exactly, yeah. But the best is if you can work towards having it in the cemetery, because if you're gonna
cemetery is very difficult. And
what I'm trying to say is that what we're seeing, the argument is here that doing in the masjid should be avoided for this reason. But the thing is, the best thing in janazah is doing the janazah and burial straight away. What we have now is that we do a janazah, then after about 45 minutes, an hour, then we have the burial. There's still a delay. But like in Blackburn, when we do a janazah, within 10 minutes it's buried.
Actually, the reason I said that is I have asked ulama, because somebody knows what to the mayyit when it is janazah prayer. Because it is concluded. When the amal is concluded, there's no swab.
To be honest with you, obviously, experts would disagree with that. And obviously, you need to understand the wording of a hadith and usul hadith to understand. One is, for example, being told a certain thing but not knowing anything what's behind that. Whatever we obviously do, we have to look at situation. And here, for example, you have a big pause. If there's no alternative, then we shouldn't, like sometimes what happens is when it comes to what I've found, when it comes to janazah, last minute people want to make things so difficult. People are arguing about these petty issues and making things so difficult for the masjid, for the mayyit, for the community, for the families, because of a petty issue that they want to hold on to. And we need to let go of those petty issues and really, just see what's better for the community. Obviously, what one of us have said, looking at older cemetery, if you were to really ask people to hold rather than cemetery, it would be really difficult. You don't even have a car park. During COVID time, we've been having the janaza in our car park. So you can imagine what's been happening. People have been parking on top of graves, right? And that's also been happening in Oldham. So that's why we have it where we have it in the masajid.
But I mean, if there's no issue, then there's no reason, is there? That's what I'm saying.
Just before I finish.
One more question was asked about the women. Within our community, we also have this issue where for ta'ziyyah, the woman whose husband passed away, sometimes she comes to the masjid and also takes part in the ta'ziyyah. That is not allowed. The woman should, if she's at home when the husband passes away, she needs to remain in the house. If she's at any other house when the husband passes away, she needs to make it back to her house immediately, if possible. But that woman should not then attend the janaza, nor should she attend the masjid for ta'ziyyah. The immediate family members who are from ta'ziyyah, they should go to the house. And then the rest of the family members, I know we have many communities who have really big family members, and this is why it's good that the masjid can facilitate for ta'ziyyah in the masjid. However, the woman should not be coming to the masjid, the one who is going to passed away.
Just before I finish, I just want to go through three things, and then inshallah we'll wrap up from here.
So there's a question regarding gravestones and writing Quran ayats on gravestones. So there's a lot of people that do it.
Yeah, that should be avoided. I don't think that's allowed at all.
And how would you advise the people, because they see it as a thing that.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I said in the beginning that people think that spending money on a janaza, it's more. The more you spend, the more it's rewarded. It's not necessarily like that. And also that people will go and read it. Actually, no. I don't see anybody reading the Quranic verse, the calligraphy that's written in fancy writing, reading it on the cemetery. That's not a reason to put that Quranic verse there. Secondly, also is that I've noticed myself that cemetery staff, when they put the grass and when they look after their graves, they disrespect the Quranic verses written on there. I.e., they put tools on there, or they might, when they're cleaning around the cemetery, the graves, it disrespects the verses for us more. So it should be avoided. Inshallah, is there any other question? I was just saying, if a person, I'm sending to Maulana Muhim, if a person dies at home, and dies in the hospital, and dies in a hospice, what to do? It's all in one JPEG. So trying to have that, so if something does happen, you have everything in one paper, what to do. Okay, so I'll send it to Maulana Muhim, inshallah, you can distribute it to you guys. Any questions, inshallah?
No, said about repatriation, is that allowed Islamically?
No. Repatriation is not allowed Islamically at all. Nobody will say it's allowed. You should be buried when you die.
We shouldn't make a big deal out of it. Like sometimes you have families that come from out of town as well. So again, when I first graduated, we came across a lot, because you tend to take things as textbook, and then you just try and say that everything is Najais. What happens then later on, you tend to actually realize that people are coming from out of town. You're going to feed them anyway, even if they came on a normal day. You feed them. What it is it's what I was trying to say is, we shouldn't be a burden on the family. So if I've come from 2 streets down, I shouldn't attend that meal that they've prepared. And this is the problem. You know, we come 2 streets down, to see to do ta'ziyah to the family, and we're walking into that room to eat, shame on us. Seriously, right? It should be that if someone's come from Bradford, or someone's come from a different town, London or Scotland, obviously you're going to feed them. You have to feed them, right? And obviously, sadly, the Mayyat's family will have to take that responsibility to feed them because it's their thingy. You won't put it on anyone else. So if someone gave you food, there's nothing wrong with that. But we should try and go away from those, those culture again. Sometimes people do it. There's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it.
What is the vicinity like? How far away should you be buried from the time where you actually passed away from the actual place?
It's the closest.
As close as possible.
Closest as possible, yeah. Closest as possible.
Obviously, if you've gone on a holiday and something happens, then you want to bring the Mayyat back home.
It's one situational, where sending it for cultural reasons, where because so and so has said you have to send it back home. Then that's not allowed. Or for example, Decomposition is saying you have to look at why and how to repatriate the body.
Some people say that the soil there is more like, I don't know, good for. I've heard about, We say that, don't they? Buried here in a long time ago.
If a person before he passes away, he saves some money to be specifically spent on his funeral expenses. So is he allowed to do that?
So the funeral expenses has to be taken out from the deceased wealth. Then after that, then it's the inheritance is distributed. It has to be taken out from the deceased wealth first.
Okay.
So that's why I said to you, the shindy and the food, the expenditure should not be taken away from the deceased wealth because that's not part of the funeral. That's part of the mehman nawazi of the family.
Okay.
That's why again I said that 3 days is the maximum because you're a mehman for 3 days after you're not mehman anymore.
In the UK, there are certain processes you have to go by. I want inheritance to be
Yeah. So I think I went through that in the beginning. Best to speak to, there's a lot of companies now that, and solicitors that help you with that. I will, Islamic will. There's so many out there. We need it now. It's a good thing now. I agree with that. Inshallah, we can open one in about 2 years' time, but not now.
If you do start a death committee, the most important thing is to just get your conditions checked by a mufti sahib. Make sure the conditions that you put in place, you verify them with the mufti sahib so that you know that there's no clause in there that will make that death committee right. Right? Because there are certain clauses that people put in the death committee that actually make it impermissible. So it's just that one condition can make something jaiz or not jaiz. So I've been actually to many people asking them, send me your conditions. They don't even have anything. It's all